Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast. Tonight we have got a very special guest in the hosting chair. Hello, Lauren North.
Hello. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for asking me 30 minutes ago to stand in. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm sorry, I'm not as funny as Rob, but I will do my best.
Well, I will see how it's not big shoes to step into, I don't think. Um, I joke. I love Rob Parker. And tonight in our guest chair, we're very lucky to be joined by Tim Weaver. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Well, please could you just tell us a little bit about your forthcoming book?
Yeah, so my new book is called The Last Goodbye, and it is comes out on June the 8th, and it is the next book in my David Raker series. David Raker is a missing persons investigator, so every single book in the Raker series is centered around a mysterious and unexplained disappearance, and The Last Goodbye is no different. In this one, a father and son go to a theme park that's just opened outside of London, and the first thing they do is make a dash for the haunted house, and they go inside this haunted house, but they never come back out again. Somewhere inside the haunted house, as impossible as it seems, they completely vanish into thin air. So Raker is working another case at that point, and he's kind of brought that the case of the father and the son ends up being connected to the one that he's working, which is a long-term disappearance of a mother who walked out on a daughter when the daughter was only 3. So these two things kind of come together, and yeah, it's a new mysterious and unexplained disappearance.
I just absolutely love the ghost train haunted house element. And I have to know, please tell me, for research, you went to lots of haunted houses and went through them over and over again.
I went to some. I mean, I've always been fascinated by theme parks. I think they're like, when we went to Disney World a few years back, it was just, and we obviously had a brilliant time there. But I just always find it fascinating that they're like these sort of mini cities, where everything is kind of, especially Disney, how they have their own kind of almost like their own, they're sort of almost autonomous, they have this like their own government and their own sort of structures, their own police force, and everything is kind of conducted in a very insular way. And I find that fascinating. And obviously the theme park in the book is not as big as Disney World, but it just was interesting. That was where I first started thinking about it, actually. And we went to Disney World, how many years ago now? 6 or 7 years ago. And I've been thinking for a while about doing a disappearance at a theme park, but the theme park, a lot of theme parks are so big that actually it's quite easy to disappear in a theme park. So I thought, what would be the next step? The next step is to kind of contain the disappearance, and obviously a haunted house is a good sort of background to a mysterious disappearance.
I love that. That's a crime writer in a nutshell, isn't it? Where you're out on like a beautiful family day and in a nice place, and you're thinking, where could a body go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure we all do it. I mean, it's you're right. You never know where those moments of sort of inspiration, or that moment where you think, oh, I wonder if this is an idea, or is this just something I should dismiss straight away. I think it's just it's just what we all do. We look at the sort of, I mean, something like Disney World is not necessarily what you would term mundane, but a lot of us do look at the sort of mundane details of life and kind of try and extract something extraordinary out of it. So yeah, it just really started there. And then obviously I went to Alton Towers, and I went to a couple of other places to sort of get a more British kind of feel.
Where was the best haunted house then? You've got to tell us. We need to go now.
They're all quite good. I mean, to be honest, the Disney one is sort of, in terms of its sort of grandeur and effects and stuff, is the best one. But I was sort of more fascinated, to be honest, by by the sort of slightly rubbish haunted houses, like that you find at the end of piers and that kind of stuff. Like there's a really terrible one on Weston-super-Mare Pier, which is about an hour from me, and we went to there and went on that, and that's really terrible. But so I saw like both ends of the scale. You had the Disney one, which was like all singing, all dancing, fireworks, amazing, like projections and all that kind of stuff, and lighting and what have you. And then you got the Weston-super-Mare Pier one, which is basically just a sort of cart that goes through a couple of rooms and then it ends. So it's so I just went to all sorts of places to kind of get a feel for it. But I've always, like I said, I've been thinking about it for a while, and it's something that I felt was the right time to do in this book.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I'm quite interested in this book. I haven't had my hands on it yet. And as we were just saying before we came on air, that the Blackbird only came out in paperback 8 weeks ago. And then you've got the hardback of The Last Goodbye coming out. And when you came on In Suspense and we spoke, and The Last Goodbye, you were just sort of wrapping it up. And you said it was the hardest book you've ever written. Now that you've taken a little step back from being in the writing process, and you've got your lovely proofs and your hardbacks coming out, can you understand why it was the hardest? If you nailed down what it was about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think distance helps you see it a little bit more clearly. But I think probably the things I told you before, when I spoke to you, probably remain the same, to be honest. Which is that the Blackbird ended in a way that was, it was a cliffhanger, basically. It sort of ends on the novel ends on a massive cliffhanger, and therefore, although the response to that from readers has been absolutely amazing, and like the Blackbird has been thankfully really well received by people.
Sunday Times bestseller.
Yeah, I mean it is. I feel very, very lucky. It's been really well received, and people seem to have enjoyed it, which is all that you can really ask for. And so, although that ending was, has been as people have really liked it, and I'm really happy about that. What it does mean is that you have to answer those questions that you set up at the end of the novel in the next one. So you're already bringing quite a bit of baggage through. And the other thing is that when you bring that storyline through to the new book, you are having to answer it you cannot let readers down. You can't deliver some damp squib of an ending to this particular storyline. So you need to bring it to a satisfying conclusion. So I brought that across. The other, I call it a mistake. I mean, it's not a mistake necessarily, but the other thing I didn't really think a lot about it at the time, but which I think in retrospect I wouldn't do again, is I not only left it on a cliffhanger, but I also set up the next one of the disappearances in the Last Goodbye. So I was talking earlier about the daughter who's looking for a mother. I set that kind of in motion at the end of the Blackbird. So I was bringing across the cliffhanger ending. I was bringing already set up the case that I was going to do. And then as I got into the novel, I thought, the problem with this is that this is a long-term disappearance, and it's not really in the vein of the sort of disappearances that have happened in every other Breaker book in the series. And they're all very like hooky, kind of really instant, very easy to understand mysteries. So I don't know, like a guy disappears on a tube train during the commuter rush, or family disappear at dinner, or a whole village disappears overnight, or in the case of The Last Goodbye, a father and son disappear in a haunted house. And so I really knew that with The Last Goodbye, I couldn't hang the whole book on this long-term disappearance, because it didn't have that instant kind of hook for readers. So that was why I introduced the ghost house element. And so before I'd even really started the book, I had these three massive things to contend with. I basically had 2 disappearances, and I was bringing across this storyline that I left as a cliffhanger at the end of the Blackbird. And so I didn't really think about it at the time, but I found out quite quickly that, comboing all those three things together and kind of interweaving them was just nightmare, absolutely nightmarish.
It does give me a headache, especially because you're not a planner. So don't even get me started on that. I can't even talk about it.
I know we had a discussion about that before, but
I'm still having nightmares.
And that is, probably one of the big downsides to not planning is that, I didn't really know how these three things connected, and I was only really finding out about it once I got it on the page. But the flip side of that, I think, as we talked about before, Lauren, is that you can pivot quite quickly, so I was able to, my original sort of vision for the book was very different from the book it ended up being, but definitely with The Last Goodbye, I hit what I called the wall, which I'm sure we all hit, like where you think this novel is useless, it's the worst thing what's the point in carrying on kind of thing. I usually hit that quite early, but I hit it quite late with The Last Goodbye. And I think that was where I kind of brought everything together. I was like then thinking to myself, how the hell am I ever going to do this? How am I going to pull this off? Like, I have no idea how I'm going to pull this off. So that was why it was just such a difficult write. Is because for a long, long time, like months, I never felt like I was on top of it and never had a handle on how this book was gonna turn out.
Amazing.
Have you tried planning in the past and not liked it, or just never been into it?
It's never really appealed to me. I mean, I think that there are a few. I mean, look, there's all sorts of ways to write a book, and there's no correct way to do it. Lots of people plan and are brilliant writers because of it. For me, the reason I don't do it is it's twofold, really. One is that characters don't come alive until you get them on the page, and so you can think about a character for as long as you like, but for me, until you've got them kind of interacting with one another, and especially putting them into situations, extreme situations, where they have to make sometimes very quick and extreme decisions. You don't know what that person's really about, what makes them tick, how they are, and so I like to get them interacting with each other on the page, before I kind of get a handle on kind of what their story is and whether the original kind of direction of travel is the right one for that character. The other thing is that by not planning, I find that you do, and it doesn't happen all the time, but you do just occasionally hit these amazing organic moments where you never even thought about this, this was going to happen until you got there. And I think in a thriller, when our job is to keep readers guessing and keep them on their toes and often pull the rug out from under them, that's a useful weapon in your armory, I think, to be able to decide at the last minute, the reader's probably going to think I'm doing this, so I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this other thing, And I think that it's for me that the benefits of that system outweigh the negatives, even though there are a lot of negatives. On the book I'm writing at the moment, I've just had to dump 10,000 words because I've just written myself into a corner on a storyline that just isn't going anywhere, and it like you guys will be the same. The more books you write, the more you just get a sixth sense for when something isn't working, and about 2 weeks ago, I started thinking, I'm not sure if this is really what I should, but I sort of persisted because I'd written so many words of this storyline, but then eventually you just have to face up to it and front up and be a bigger man about it. And I just cut it today, and it feels kind of like a weight off in a weird way, even though I've just wasted 2 weeks of my life doing these words. It feels like a weight off. So yeah, that is the downside to not planning. But planning is just not something that has ever appealed to me. And I think, just very briefly, the other thing I enjoy about not planning is that you discover the book in the same way a reader discovers it, so you don't know where it's going to go, and you don't know kind of what works until you're there, and so there's a sort of joy in the discovery, I think, which kind of keeps me, I should say, because this is not for everyone, but it keeps me, I want to say energized. I mean, some days you aren't energized, but it keeps you kind of going. And I think that opportunity to find out a bit more every day about the book you're writing is kind of like it is kind of what keeps me going through the endless amounts of drudgery which are involved in working on a project for 10 months.
We're hoping that this podcast isn't part of the drudgery, obviously.
Oh, no. This is lovely. I like doing stuff like this. I'm talking purely about the writing side of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm a massive planner, and I threw 30,000 words away this month. So, there's no guarantee that it's going to be any kind of magical fix. So,
and what made you decide to do that? Did you just realize it wasn't working? Or?
Well, I still stand by the possibility it could have worked, but no one would touch it with a barge pole. So I decided that at that point that I had to cut my losses. So it's fine. I'm over it, as you can tell by the squeakiness of my voice.
Right.
So it's interesting because a minute ago you mentioned reaching the wall. And I love having little reads of people's interviews they do, sort of back when they were starting out. And one thing you said in 2012, which was 11 years ago, obviously, because everyone else can count, which was Raker Book 3, you said that the hardest part of writing is the 40 to 70K stage, where you hate the writing and you start having all the doubts. So you're so many more books through now. Is that still the bit you hate the most about writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that middle section of the book is, for me, is always the hardest bit. When you start out on and you guys will undoubtedly feel this as well. When you start out on a project, you're all like, "This is brilliant." Like I'm feeling so refreshed about this idea because it's a new idea, and the next idea is always the best idea. So you start out on this journey, and for a while it feels really exciting, and you're energized, and you look forward to getting sitting in front of your computer every day and just finding out about this book and this world and these characters and everything else. And then for me, you do hit that wall around, 40. I mean, maybe it was a bit better back in the day. I actually think I'm hitting the wall a bit sooner now, but I think around about 30,000 words, you're quite a way into the book by then, and it's become a bit more familiar to you. And because it's become a bit more familiar to you, you're sort of less engaged with it in a way. It doesn't carry that kind of excitement that it does when you first started it, And around the middle of the book is always the tricky point, because that's also the point at which, for example, in a Raker book, there are almost always two different storylines, sometimes three, that come together, and all these characters come together eventually, and you understand why. But for me, knitting all those things together is the nightmare. Once you brought them all together, then the end part of the book is quite satisfying in a way, because you can see the end in sight, but you've also got past the bit where you've had to bring them all together and also explain in a rational and kind of understandable and exciting and tension filled way that
you make it sound so easy.
That all these things are connected. Yeah, and it isn't easy, So that middle section is always the hardest bit. And so no, I don't think I have changed my view on it. And I think actually, writing, I don't know, you guys may feel differently, but writing for me that hasn't become easier over time. If anything, it's become more difficult, because you with every single book, you're always trying to think, right, how can I make this different to the last one? I always challenge myself at the beginning of every book to try and make it sort of bigger and better than the last one. And so that's a difficult thing to do, when you've written quite a lot of books. I'm writing my 15th book at the minute. And so there have been like lots of times where I've written something and I've thought, actually, this feels familiar, and then you realize that you've done it before, and it's especially tricky in a series, I think, because with a series you have the same character returning, so it's very easy to make things feel very familiar because it's very easy to do stuff that he's done before, without sometimes even realizing it. So yeah, I'd say my opinion on that hasn't really changed. I think it is kind of still quite a tricky. The middle bit is where you hit the wall.
Amazing.
Did the success of The Blackbird change how you approach this novel?
Not really. No, I mean, no, I mean, I think you just have to write kind of what you want to write. Like I think it's. I mean, I stopped. I mean, listen, this always sounds like I'm not grateful for people reviewing my book, but I am. I always am. I think it's amazing that people respond to your work. I feel enough of a connection with it to write something about it. But I don't read my reviews, and the reason I don't read my reviews is because they can affect your headspace a little bit. Like the good ones, no, they don't. The good ones make you feel great about yourself, but the bad ones really do stick with you and make you feel pretty terrible. Like some people can be very, very cruel. So I don't read my reviews, so I don't ever feel like the book I'm writing is a response to something that a number of people have picked up about a book. Like there are, in the early days when I didn't read my reviews, there were certain things people said about certain of the books that were consistent themes that, especially the first one, which is quite divisive, a lot of people were like, I don't like this, and so it would have been easy to sort of think, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to do this. But I think that's dangerous going down that route. Then you're like, it's like designed by committee then, and I think you have to just write the book that you want to write. And I think in your heart of hearts, whether that book is something you can stand behind, and completely believe in. And if you can, then you just write the book you love. And because the other thing is it takes me 10 months to write a book. I'm not going to spend 10 months to something that I don't believe in or that I'm not fully engaged with, and obviously I said earlier, there are moments where you feel like it's a bit more mundane, but that doesn't mean you're not ever like watching the quality level and making sure that you deliver on the things that you wanted to deliver in the book. So yeah, I don't really respond to that. I just write the books that I want to write, and you hope the readers come along for the ride. And fortunately, touch wood, I'm touching wood here. People have come along for the ride with the Raker books, and so the other thing is that they know, hopefully the readers know now that Raker is not suddenly going to become an astronaut and go and live on Mars. Like there are certain rules that apply to the Raker, for want of a better word, Rakerverse. And
I love that.
There are certain rules that apply to it. So readers should have a level of confidence that I won't ever do anything insane with the book. But at the same time, like in order to keep the series feeling fresh, I have to be able to do stuff that sometimes some people might not like as much as other people, but it just is something that I want to write about and I think is important part of the series. So yeah, so it's you must all, well, I'm not telling people what to do, but I think a piece of advice that I would give that I wish someone had given me when I was starting out was just write what you want to write and just try and cut out the noise if you can.
Yeah, that's such a good advice. And you mentioned worrying sometimes that you're rewriting something that you've done in a previous book, which I completely understand. And you also said that you went to the theme parks in Disney 7 years ago, and you sort of knew at that point there was like a seedling. And I could almost imagine you with a little post-it on your wall just said theme park on a little note somewhere. Like how many sort of missing persons cases, just little seedlings have you got like lined up? I mean, do you worry that you're gonna run out of how people can disappear?
Not really, no. I mean, I think ideas are never so much of an issue. I think they're basically infinite ideas, like obviously some ideas are kind of amalgamations of things that have gone before, or a slight alteration of ideas that have come before. I was a bit suspicious of people who claim that they've got a totally original idea, like it's those things, they're very rare if ever they happen, so I think I don't worry about ideas, because it's like you say, I just see stuff and I think, oh, that would be quite, maybe that's, I mean, often I don't think, like I don't think, oh, that's a great idea for a disappearance. So often the spark will be something like, you go somewhere, like with the Blackbird, part of it's set in Northumberland, and so we went to Northumberland. I think it was the first year of COVID, and we went on holiday there, and it was beautiful. I loved it up there, and really, I just thought this is a very like moody place, it's quite bleak. We were very lucky with weather, but when I was there, I thought this would be very bleak in winter, and then I thought, oh, that'd be quite maybe I should, this would be an interesting area to kind of set something. So that's often how it starts, and then you start thinking about you building the disappearance on top. But the disappearance side of stuff is really obviously I look at real life cases, and sometimes I might use them as very loose inspiration or that kind of stuff. There are often cases in the real world that are so crazy that if you included them in a book, your agent editor would be like, sorry, Tim,
Don't be ridiculous.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. You can't do this. So I don't really worry too much about that. I mean, the Post-it note stuff is definitely a thing, like you won't be able to see this on your podcast, but I'll show Lauren and Chris my Mac. There's Post-it notes all around it, which is all stuff from the book I'm writing, and this is all to remind me, like, stuff I've set up that I don't want to forget, and it's even like small stuff, and that is I guess a consequence of not planning. But the disappearances stuff, no, I mean, I've never struggled for inspiration. And the other thing I think with doing a series about missing people is that what's interesting about missing people is that there's never a definitive answer to it. So you can kind of take it off in whatever direction you want it to go, So some of the books have been more procedural, I guess, and they've ended up with murders and that kind of stuff, and some of them have been just outright mysteries, like someone who's completely vanished into thin air and there's no trace of them at all, so because you don't have to start with a dead body, you can pretty much do anything to an extent, and so therefore I've never felt constrained by that. And so people often ask me, how many more books can you write, and I always say, well, as long as people keep buying them, then there's plenty more mileage left in the tank, I think, where this is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with your main character, is The Last Goodbye book 12?
It's book 4. It's my 14th book, and it's Raker 13.
13. Do you still? I always sounds a bit like la-di-da when I talk about like knowing the character and whatever, but does he do things that surprise you, or do you think you know him pretty well by now?
I think a bit of both. When you're starting out, one of the joys of doing a series is that you don't have to discover this character. So Raker, I talked earlier about how characters don't come alive until you get them on the page. Well, Raker is already fully formed before I get him on the page. It's really the other characters that I need to discover as I'm writing the book. So I do know him like well, and therefore finding his voice is extremely easy. But at the same time, because I don't plan, he has gone off in done things, I suppose, in that I might not have thought about beforehand. And there have been a couple of like major events in his life, particularly think of one in my 4th book, Never Coming Back, like a major thing happens to him, a life-changing event, really. And I never really thought about doing that until I got quite far into the book, and that's had like repercussions for the whole rest of the series, and has changed him in ways that I might not have thought about if I'd never done that, you know. So I definitely think a bit of both, you know, like you instantly are in the character's head the moment your fingers are at the keyboard. But I think at the same time, each story presents a different challenge to him. And each set of characters present a different challenge to him. And therefore, you know, he set a challenge and he rises to that challenge, or he, you know, sometimes fails at that challenge, and that has a knock-on effect in the next book and the next book and the next book. You know, like you can read all of the books as standalones. You don't have to read them in order at all. You know, anyone can come in at any stage. But I think, you know, over the course of the series, obviously, if you read them in order, you see the ways in which he has changed and developed, and, you know, some of the callbacks, you know, in some of the books, call back to cases that happened a long time ago, you know. And there's particularly in the long goodbye, Freudian slip. In the last goodbye, he calls back that there's a character that was in one of the earlier books, which was a major part of Raker's life, and, you know, she kind of comes back, and it has an effect on him emotionally and psychologically. And so, you know, all of this stuff is kind of changing him in ways that you couldn't really foresee until you get into the writing of it. But at the same time, you have a fairly fixed view of who he is just from having written so many books with him in.
So amazing. Chris, have I got time to ask another question, or do you want to move on?
By all means, you go for it.
Because I always sort of see Raker as the UK Jack Reacher. And I'm lucky enough to be on a panel with Andrew Child at Crime Fest. And it made me think, would you ever consider handing over the series to someone else? Or, you know, it's like handing over a child. Could you do it?
No, I don't think so. No, it's I'm a bit too much of a control freak, I think. You know, like I mean, a perfect illustration of this really is that you know, when I write a book, it takes me 10 months to write a book, and I don't let anyone read it during that time, and I only let my agent and editor read it until it's in pretty close to finished state, because I'm just so obsessed with getting the book as good as it can possibly be, you know, before people get their hands on it. And therefore, I think handing it over to someone else would be really difficult, especially because it's someone that, you know, I've been with for such a long, you know, such a big period of my life, you know, in such a, you know, almost every single day, you know, I kind of think about David Raker and the books, you know, in some way or another. Even if I'm not working on them, I'm, you know, thinking about them. I think handing them over would be really hard. I found it, because the series has been optioned for TV. I found even that quite hard, sort of, you know, handing it over to other people to kind of construct their vision, you know, for it. And so handing over the reins on the actual novel side of stuff, I think would just be no, that would just be a one stage too far. Although, you know, like, I don't have a brother, so if my brother asked me, can I write the Raker books, I might be different. I probably wouldn't be different, actually. I'd probably still say no.
You're involved with the script writing as well, I think, are you, for the Raker series? Are you sort of keeping your hand in with that? Because it's quite a collaborative process, isn't it, the scripts?
It is, yeah. Not for the Raker series. Well, I am I mean, if it gets made, I mean, you know what it's like with TV stuff. It'll, you know, there's a good chance it'll never get made, you know. But if it gets made, I will be writing scripts on it. But I won't be show running it. They're getting someone else to show run it, which I think, you know, like in my heart and the heart of hearts, I know is the best thing for it, because I think it's important to have someone else's perspective on it, you know. And but I am separately doing. I wrote a pilot script for a TV show. I've actually written 2 pilot scripts for 2 TV shows, but one of them was taken on by Jed Mercurio's production company, and it's sort of in development. I mean, that doesn't really mean anything other than it's being, you know, we've pitched it around, and some people have turned it down, and some people have expressed interest in it. And there's been a lot of writing pitches and rewriting scripts, and that's just the beginning of the process. But it's been interesting. It's very, very different to, I don't know if either of you have done any of that sort of stuff, but it's very, very different to writing books. Books you have like a real control over, I think, in a way. You're quite you remain the conductor of it, whereas with scripts it feels a bit more like you're kind of like sort of a little bit designed by committee. Everyone's kind of got a say on it, or thinks something else or doesn't like this, and I know it'll only get more like that if it gets down the road, because they won't be able to shoot this thing because they don't have the budget, or they can't find this location, or they haven't got the time, or whatever, all that kind of stuff. So, but it was something that I just wanted to I've always wanted to scratch that itch, and I honestly didn't expect I didn't expect anyone to be interested in it. I just wrote it because in lockdown, because I had lots of time. I thought I'd give it a go, and I was really surprised when someone of that quality was like, "Yeah, it's great. Let's see if we can get it made." And so, it's just been an interesting experience, and meeting with networks and stuff has been cool, and it's just been I've enjoyed it. But as we speak now, nothing has happened with it, and nothing maybe ever will. But it's just been a interesting sort of side project to the books.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing slower. We think publishing is slow, don't we? But TV is like crazy slow.
It is so slow. Like, everything takes ages. Like, it's so slow to get any sort of response from people, or it's crazy. But I think once some of these things kind of get a little bit further down the line, then things happen quite quickly. But it's that initial stage is just so slow. So there's been lots of sort of, I mean, the Raker stuff is a bit like that. It got optioned, and there was lots of like meetings and chat and stuff, and then it was just like 6 months of absolute silence before I heard anything again. So very, very different to publishing, but just something that I wanted to do, and something that's been quite interesting so far.
Yeah.
And at this point, are you up for playing a game?
Yeah.
It's called One Star Superstar. So what I've done is I've gone and found someone who's given one of your books a 1-star review. And then I've looked at what else they've reviewed, and you just have to tell me whether it's 1 star or 5-star.
Okay.
I was terrible when I had to do
it. This is your redemption arc. The first one is the first item is like a portable wireless Bluetooth speaker. 5-star or 1 star?
1 star.
Okay. Any particular reason?
I feel like that's got the potential to like someone who hands out 1-star reviews to books. I got the feeling a Bluetooth speaker's got the potential to fail in some small way on them, and then rage out about it.
Yeah, good reasoning. Yeah. Okay. Lauren?
Oh, I don't want to go. I'm always so optimistic. So I'm like, oh, I'm sure they give it 5 stars. But no, I'm sticking with Tim as well. 1 star, 1 star.
Okay. Both wrong, I'm afraid.
Oh, I should have gone with my optimism.
It's a 5-star. Usually they're mostly 1 stars, but they were skeptical at first about whether they needed another gizmo, but they really liked it. So that's a win for them.
Wait until the Bluetooth fails on it, though.
Yeah.
And then they'll be back.
Yeah.
The next one is a 500 milliliter, like a mixer, an electric mixer, and you put the bowl in it. So it's a 500 milliliter mixing bowl.
I don't know. Now they've given five stars to that Bluetooth speaker. All bets are off.
Is it the same person, or is it a different person?
Same person. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right then. All right. Okay.
I reckon they got to go 1 star with this. Surely, like, they can't just have handed out 1 stars to my books.
So I'm going to go 5 now, because I think that if there's someone who perhaps just hates books but loves gadgets, then I'm going to go 5
Yeah, that's
stars.
a good shout. Yeah.
That is a good shout. Not the right shout, though.
Oh.
Sorry,
See, I tell you,
Lauren.
I'm terrible at this.
It was a 1 star. And the reason why is pretty good. So their mixing bowl broke and they needed a new one. So they ordered one from Sussex Spares on the Amazon website, and it's described as 500 milliliters. When it turned up, it wouldn't fit in, and they didn't know why. And it turned out it was 1,000 milliliter, even though it was labeled as 500. When they phoned the company, they said it is 500 milliliters because a normal person would only ever fill it half full so that there wouldn't be spillages. So they
Yeah.
label it as 500 milliliters.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Oh man.
Yeah. So
I bet that reasoning didn't go down too well.
no, absolutely not. Straight under the 1 star, and it's like an essay they've written. I've very much shortened it for this. So well done. You're our winner, Tim.
Oh, thank you. Well,
And to finish off, we ask, what are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading The House Hunt by Chris Ewan at the moment, which comes out. I think it comes out in August. I've only just started it because I had extreme tooth problems the last couple of weeks. So anyone who's had toothache before, which I've never had until now, knows that like when it's all up in your eye and in the side of your face, it's quite hard to read. So I've been a bit slack on the reading front for the last 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, I'm reading The House Hunt by Chris Ewan, which is about a woman that goes to view a house, and the estate agent turns up at the house, or at least he says he's the estate agent.
Oh.
So it's good. I mean, Chris does really, really, really good, like claustrophobic cat and mouse thrillers. So I've got high hopes for this one.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, that sounds great. What about you, Lauren?
Oh, I just finished today The Vanishing of Class 3B by Jackie Kabler, which someone recommended on our podcast. And it was just like the title alone was just enough to get me going. So obviously a whole class disappeared. So I was like, right, I've got to read this book. And it was absolutely superb. So I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's good.
What about you, Chris?
I recently finished The Village Hall Vendetta by Jonathan Whitelaw, which is the second in the Bingo Hall detective series. Really, really great. And I'm going to Mallorca on Friday for 8 days, and I'm going to finally tackle The Stand, Stephen King.
Right.
Oh, I saw that. I was going to put it, please don't. It really scared me.
Did it? Do you think, is it, because it's like a 1,400 odd pages, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
it's a big book.
I just thought every time I come to it, I think, is it worth the commitment?
I just think you're so optimistic that at the age with your children that you think you'll be able to sit by a pool for that length of time.
Yeah, it's never going to happen. But
even if you go for 8 days, you've still got to get through, what is that, like 150, 175 pages a day or whatever.
Yeah, it just feels too, and especially I'm at the start of writing something new, and it's sort of all I can think about. So I find myself not reading as much as I should. So I think I'm being very optimistic. Perhaps I'll read something else. You've convinced me.
I like it. No, I don't want to put you off. I mean, if it was on a Kindle, it might be a bit better for your suitcase. But
I did buy it on Kindle. I thought there's no hope of bringing that. Especially with Ryanair, it probably cost me about 55 quid.
Can you imagine?
Tim, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been great and really fascinating to hear about your process and everything. So, yes, The Last Goodbye is out on the 8th of June, and please do go buy it.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to listen to it. I actually listened to The Blackbird, so I'm going to listen to. I'm a big Audible fan. It's very well spoken, narrated.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks for having me. It's been great to chat to you guys.
Yeah, it's been lovely, and I'm sure we'll see you down the line at some point.
Okay. Cheers.
Take care.